Guess what? A recent study reveals that most kids age 8 to 12 years old aren't exactly buying into the whole biblical worldview thing, and only 3% of them embrace all the 7 cornerstones of a biblical worldview. These cornerstones include beliefs in God, sin, and trusting the Bible. Only about a third acknowledge their sins and seek forgiveness, and just over a quarter do what they believe God wants them to do. The study also suggests that kids' beliefs are influenced by adults, and most adults aren't exactly devout believers. So it seems like the younger generation is forging their own path when it comes to faith. Let's see where their journey takes them. This article is from the Christian Post by Ryan Foley on October 23rd, 2023. And, this reminds me a lot of kind of my journey, when I started off in my youth just believing what I was told, and then grew up, got older, was less devout. And I think I just kind of adopted more worldviews that were kind of all thrown together. But before we get into really what I feel, I want to see how this article struck the one and only Kelly Laughlin. Kelly, what do you think?
Wow, I didn't know you were going to throw it right to me. One of the things that I
That's
found
my
was
bad,
really
Kelly, because I meant to throw it to Cindy, and I skipped
that's
Cindy on
okay. I'll throw it
accident.
to her. I'll throw it to her
Okay.
for you.
I
Okay.
didn't know
I
we
found
were
it
going.
interesting. No, go
No,
ahead,
go
Cindy.
ahead.
You go.
Okay.
No,
Uh,
please. I'll defer to you.
yeah, one of the most striking quotes from this article was 35% of adolescents think that sin is real and significant. We are all sinners by choice. And this to me is the most harmful aspect of this religion, because not only it is totally illogical, contradictory, because you cannot be responsible for something you are born with. That just doesn't make any sense. But it removes any self-worth to individuals, and at the same time instills victim blaming into the equation. And that's something that's extremely harmful to a society at large, and to individuals also. Uh, and it's very very damaging on the psychological level. It also hits home because uh, I have a person who is close to me um, who is being harmed by their parents because of their religious beliefs, and those religious beliefs, they prevent the parents from seeking any help because they believe that, well, because they believe they can't be um, harming their child. You know, uh, if I'm guided by the law, then I cannot do anything wrong, basically. And so, with everything that's going on right now in the world, every time we speak, especially in the ACA, every time we speak about religion, uh, we often speak about the many death that it causes. But I think we need to speak much more about uh, the hundreds of millions in history who were miserable, sometimes for their entire life, because of the religion's dogmas. I think that's something we need to emphasize, because sometimes death is not the worst thing that can happen to you. A lifetime of misery because of a belief, uh, sometimes it can be worse. And that's why we need to fight those beliefs and those um, uh, indoctrination techniques that we see talked about in this article. uh, and yeah, I think that's why I'm here, especially myself. And I guess that it's the same for you guys. Kelly?
One of the things I found funny about the article was that the same organization that published these 7 cornerstones of a biblical worldview, the Cultural Resource Center at Arizona Christian University, is also the same organization that says young people today aren't abiding by them. You know, first they're like, hey, everybody follow these rules. And then a few months later, they're like, hey, this is bullshit. Nobody's following these rules we want them all to follow. And I just thought that was just kind of funny and I had never heard of the 7 cornerstones before in my life, so I had to go look them up. And to be honest, I wouldn't abide by them either. You know, quick rundown: Orthodox biblical understanding of God. All human beings are sinful by nature. Knowing Jesus Christ is the only means of salvation. The entire Bible is true, reliable, and relevant, and it's is a moral guide. Absolute moral truth exists, and that truth is defined by God. The ultimate purpose of human life is to know, love, and serve God. Success on earth is being understood as consistent obedience to God. There you go, all 7 of them. I every Sunday on the call-in shows, we hear Christians calling in trying to make one of these points and just being ridiculed by the hosts. I don't know why this organization and Dr. Barna would have the idea that rational people would listen to these things and abide by them. And let's face it, kids are getting educated a lot faster and a lot more intricately that's not the word. They're getting a lot more education a lot faster than they did when I was a young lad. And a lot of these people, I'm sure Barna's my age, you know, a lot of these older guys are like, hey, how come these kids don't buy into this bullshit anymore? And yeah, I could see why. Aaron?
Yeah, the internet's been a great thing for learning things that you weren't necessarily taught by your parents and sometimes your school, depending on where you live. The internet can be a bad thing. You can go out there and learn about things that are patently not true, you know, flat earth and things like that. But you can also come to YouTube and find videos about the history of the Bible and how and why it was compiled and put together. You can find, you know, all sorts of fun stuff about challenging your dogmatic beliefs that you've been taught. And you know, I like these numbers aren't as low as I'd like them to be, but they're low enough that I kind of like them. The one number that was concerning me was 69% of people still believe in God. I wish that was a little bit lower, because there's just I learned, you know, a few years ago when I started watching ACA shows, there's just no evidence. There's no good reason to believe that God exists. And which God are you going to believe? The God of the Bible or one of the other hundreds or thousands of gods that people have proposed? I'm encouraged because historically the truth seems to win out over long periods of time, over lifetimes. And you know, if you look at something like homosexuality, you know, 50 years ago it was considered a mental illness. You had to be cured from it, and now it's understood that's just how you are. That's just how we come into the world as human beings. And there are even Christian sects that have pastors and priests that are gay. That's a big change in 50 years. And same-sex marriage is now legal in the United States by law passed by our Congress, amazingly, but not by Supreme Court decree. And yeah, so these numbers the trend is encouraging to me. Jimmy?
Well, what we see in this article really shouldn't be a surprise to any of us, because we all know that children are likely to reflect their parents' viewpoints, and they're often shielded from what the Bible actually teaches anyway. So I don't believe that many children would think on their own that it's okay to own other human beings, or that women should marry their rapists, right? So that those might be complex concepts for a lot of youth, but I think without outside influence, those kinds of things really wouldn't resonate with a normal person. And I use normal loosely, but reacting to the research in this article, Dr. George Barna, a veteran evangelical poster, insisted that we know what practices are most effective at developing young disciples. Yeah, exactly. To the points that have already been made, you know, children are being educated quicker and to better quality. And so the thing that it would take, or what it would take to develop young disciples, is for parents to step in and thwart that education and really hamper the potential that their children can have. And Barna continues, any parent can be part of the solution if they so desire. It starts with a commitment to raising a spiritual champion, whatever that means, which requires a solid plan that the adult consistently implements. The plan calls for a steady diet of teaching, discussing, and modeling biblical principles and evaluating how well the child is doing at understanding and applying those principles. What this article is really uncovering is that religion is having trouble holding on to their congregations because they are getting older, more educated, and leaving the church. And they don't have their parents to really lie to them and beat them down. And even the parents are leaving. It's precisely what the evangelical poster in this article states, that in order to raise young disciples, children need a mass of parents, grandparents, pastors, teachers, coaches, and other influencers. And that's just not happening, right? These people are necessary, right? It takes a village kind of thing to prioritize biblical teaching in order to brainwash their kids, essentially. And even this evangelical Dr. Barna notices that people are less willing to do that. We're moving on, and I say we, just us as a people in general, from religion. If you look back decades ago, 90% of American society claimed to be religious. Aaron said 69%, only 69% today identify as religious. I had 70. But even those who cling to these dogmas, as it seems like it's dissipating, we're also seeing this increase in people considering themselves spiritual, which is kind of annoying because we don't really know what that even means, but I'll take it as a win. If somebody's going to leave their religion and they're going to adopt other worldview kind of positions and merge these different things that they're learning and consider themselves spiritual, then, hey, those are potentially less children being molested in cathedrals and maybe, less women being oppressed because those traditional mindsets aren't being enforced. And so that's my take on how I see religion going and how it relates to children. So, Cindy, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we know that if we forbade religion to be taught to children before the age of 18, for example, religion would disappear in a couple generations. We know that there is a reason why parents want to teach their religion to their children. It's because it's the only way to have them believe. It's by teaching all this nonsense at a very young age. And it's so hard, especially in the US, where this idea that parents have almost unlimited right regarding their children. It's almost impossible to have this discussion, but we need to find a way to protect children. And one of the ways is to give them access to as much education as possible. And as you said, the internet does that. And the ACA shows and other platforms on the internet, they also participate in providing this education. But we need to try and make it more palatable and more accessible to children, because they are the primary target of Christians. And so we need to find better ways to protect them. Kelly?
I agree. That's yeah, I totally agree. In fact, Barnes said, if these influencers really love or care about young people, then following through with effective disciple-making practices should not be a significant obstacle. Really? I mean, loving and caring about young people that's teaching them they're in an abusive relationship with an imaginary being. It doesn't make any sense to me. And like principle 2 and 3 really are. They sound like the language that an abused domestic partner would say. It's really, really horrible. Everybody has mentioned something about people leaving religion, and I was wondering what everybody thought was the reason for that. I'm an ex-RFR agent recovering from religion. I've talked to people. I talked to a lot of people on Discord about it, so I have some personal views on it. No data to give you or anything, but I was wondering, I'd like to hear what everybody else thought, and then I'll give you some of my personal experiences. So, Aaron, what do you think is causing this movement away from religion?
I think it's just we're learning so much more about the way the world works. We know, and we have a lot more knowledge now about where these religions come from and why they exist. And for me, it was finally, I mean, I was religious. Even after I left the church, I still believed in God. I was just angry and didn't want anything to do with him anymore. It wasn't until I started listening to ACA shows where I realized, oh, there's this thing called evidence. And there's actually no evidence that God actually exists, because it's all, there's just no evidence that God is actually real. And that's what kind of
What do
brought
you
me out
think?
of it.
What are you thinking is making these young people leave, though? You think it's better education?
I think I think it's the internet. Personally, I think they're being exposed
Yeah,
to
you did
different
mention that.
ideas on the internet, on YouTube, on TikTok, or wherever they're looking. There, you can't have an insulated kid anymore. They're going to go to school and they're going to watch videos and they're going to be on YouTube and they're going to come across things, and it's just like Daniel said in the Bible, it's like a stone rolling down the hill and just gaining more and more momentum. And it's just going to gain more and more momentum. And who knows what the religious landscape in this country, in this world, is going to look like in 50 to 100 years.
Yeah,
I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. Jimmy?
And to continue on that, to piggyback, if you will, the kids are recognizing the bullshit. And it's because they're, maybe through the internet, but their guard is let down a little bit. And they're starting to see that there are other people out there that they are accepting of. And their faith, this dogma, tells them that they can't be accepting of them. And I think a lot of the kids would just choose their friends over this ridiculous ideology that can't be proven true, right? And one thing that helps that along is the lack of consistency in religion. There are so many holes, and we covered one just in this show already, because the article, or in this segment, I should say, the article said that we are all sinners by choice. Well, I really never heard that. I always heard growing up that we were naturally sinners, right? I mean, we're bad people. That's it. We're bad people, and it's not by choice. It's because of the choices that were made by Adam and Eve, and we've just inherited that, and we're going to think ugly things and do ugly things, and we always have to ask for forgiveness. But we have a choice. That's news to me. And so that is just one minuscule way that things just don't line up. But that is consistent across the board. They never line up. And I think as children are exposed to more learning methods, to more ideas, to more people that are unlike themselves or unlike their community, they're starting to see these inconsistencies, and in a greater variety. So,
the world is shrinking. The world is much smaller than it used to be, right? It used to be, 100, 200 years ago, you were never exposed to anything but your tribe in your town or wherever you lived. And now our tribe is the whole world. You get to see what's going on all over the world, in the news, on the internet, everywhere. And so you get to see all the different ideas and all the different things, and just like, interesting. Not everybody's a Christian. Not everybody's a Muslim. Right. Not everybody's this or that.
Right.
Interesting. It kind of get you thinking. Cindy?
Yeah, I completely agree with that idea. Exposition to different ideas is also education. So that's part of the idea.
One of the things that I heard a lot was educational experience. Like kids would say, I have a friend who is gay, because the younger generation is a lot more open about being gay and realizing this person is not a bad person. And yet all these religious people I know are condemning this person for being bad, and they're a good person. And that was one of the things I heard. And another thing that I heard a lot was hypocrisy. Those people over there, what they're doing is really bad. But when we do the same thing, it's in the name of God, so it's all right. And those were the two things, the two things that I heard the most from people, and still do on Discord. So I thought, but I think you're right. I think education is a big part of it. I think that's where we're headed. That maybe, hopefully, more and more and more kids will be coming to their senses and reject these bad, outdated teachings. Hopefully. And we want to hear more from you, a lot more from you. So leave a comment below. Email us at nonprofits at atheist-community.org. And if you want to watch more nonprofits, you can click right here.
Hold on to your halos. The International House of Prayer in Kansas City is serving up more twists and turns than a heavenly labyrinth. Mike Bickle, the founder, faces serious allegations, including sexual immorality. Leaders hired a new law firm for an impartial examination. Bickle is accused of using spiritual authority for unholy manipulation. So scandalous. It's a battle between accusers and accused, with the fate of heavenly leadership hanging in the balance. Stay tuned for the next episode of Heavenly Havoc. Can I get an amen? Or a bucket of celestial popcorn? This story is from the Church and Ministry News by Daniel Villarreal on November 4th, 2023, and Church and Ministry News by Leonardo Blair on November 8th, 2023. Now, before we dive into this one, I think it's important to point out here that there hasn't been any criminal charges filed in this case, or at least I didn't see any mentioned in the article. Also, as a fan of another famous international house of things that start with P, I resent that this group is piggybacking on the crispy bacon and delicious fluffy goodness of others. Having said that, this article gives me a little bit of cautious optimism, especially when we consider that many of these allegations are going to be well beyond the statute of limitations. And so the legal obligation for this church organization to follow up on these things is not necessarily so clear. Obviously, there's a moral obligation, an ethical obligation, and possibly even a professional obligation for them to do this. And so I think it's good that there's at least a portion of this organization that is doing a little bit of self-policing. The founding IHOPCA, I guess that's the acronym there, IHOPCA, the International House of Prayer for Kansas City. Their founding member, Dwayne Roberts, former IHOPCA executive Brian Kim, and former pastor West Martin, they released a joint statement about the allegations. They said, without going into details to protect the privacy of the victims' identities, we have found these allegations of clergy sexual abuse by Mike Bickle to be credible and long-standing. The credibility of these allegations is not based on any one experience or any one victim, but on the collective and corroborating testimony of the experiences of several victims. So there at least appears to be some portion of this organization that's taking a thoughtful approach and a victims first approach. Infidel, what was your thoughts on this?
Well, when I first read it and read about sexual immorality by, with multiple women, it sounded like Mike got caught with more than his hand in the cookie jar. And, normally this is something I really wouldn't want to pay attention to. It'd be his problem. And of course, if there were some ethical issues, that as well, but not mine. But, we do find a special case here. I mean, we could cue the familiar music. I think we all know this well. The song, he plays the moral authority while behaving in a way that's completely contradictory. It's just an example of this insidious nature that, we see time and again. He dismisses it as, Satan's tactics are coming up against him in a recent sermon about these accusations. But he's done this before. He's talked about the gay marriage agenda and how they're being rooted in the depths of hell. Blaming the devil's work for him in the past, I think we're just seeing more of the same. But it does really ring true to what type of character we're talking about here when, as you mentioned, the not House of Pancakes themselves recognizing that there were some credible things that required them to look, and him just stonewalling them. It's really not a good look and a good reflection on him at all. Recently, but it did remind me that another story I read about a pastor who was exposed by a right-wing organization as dressing up in women's clothes. His wife knew. He told the truth. He didn't have a history of anti-LGBTQ, and he was open about it, apologized, even though, I don't think the man had anything to apologize for, but it drove him to take his life. Now I look at this guy and I don't feel the type of sympathy I did for that gentleman and his family, because this guy has made a career on hurting other people. It's been his moneymaker, is to insult, dehumanize people, to try to create a wedge between people and their families. This guy is getting a taste of his own medicine, and to get religious and quote the Bible, because I know people like him enjoy that sort of thing. Whatever a man soweth, that also shall he reap. I can only hope that Bickle gets half of what he deserves. Blayton, what do you got?
I just want to echo what both of you guys have actually already said. First of all, how dare these people sully the good name of IHOP? A hefty bacon-filled omelet and a buttery stack of fluffy pancakes is all I want associated with that acronym at any time. But on to the actual issue here. According to this article, like Scott said, several members, including one of the founders, put out a statement after they had taken some action. But within that statement, they actually said that they attempted to speak with Bickle directly before anything in the spirit of Matthew 18, 15, 17. And that passage reads as follows for those that don't know. If your brother sins against you, go to him, tell him his fault. Between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained a brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen to even the church, let him be as a Gentile and a tax collector. Taxes are bad. The Bible said so. Anyway, so without me even getting into the whole Gentile,
Jesus got mad about them.
A whole nother thing. He did. Jesus don't like that. But without me getting into all that, this should give anybody reading the Bible questions as to why the fuck they care what the Bible says. Because look at the passage on its face and understand that these people really thought that this was something to put into that statement as something like, yeah, we did it. Look at the actual thing. It says if he sins against your brother, if your brother sins against you, whatever it says. First of all, he allegedly committed a horrible crime against multiple people whose lives have been forever changed as a result. That's not a sin against you, brother. Nobody gives a shit about you, brother. So, and then second, if he doesn't listen to you, take it to the church. No, dude, we live in a time with paved roads and motorized vehicles. Right. Most importantly, we have laws. I don't give a damn what the pastor has to say about this. Don't take it to the church. I will say, their actual reaction to it, as far as removing him from his position eventually and showing public support for the alleged victims, that's refreshing. I wasn't expecting to read that, so that's refreshing. But just like Infidel was saying, looking at Bickle's history, I'm not shocked by what we're seeing here, because I've said it before and I'll say it again. The loudest, angriest voices in most religious sects are usually screaming at themselves. This man made a living off screaming about sexual depravity. I am not at all shocked to find out he's a sexual deviant. It's par for the course.
Okay,
that's all I got to say about that.
Mm-hmm. So, oh no. Oh dear, I am shocked that another pastor accused of sexual assault and abuse is now being found out and shouted against anti-queer. It was anti-queer as well. It must be Wednesday because it happens over and over and over again. And I was kind of laughing because when the International House of Pastors, Kansas City, whatever. I don't fucking care. I don't claim that they're
not pancakes, unfortunately.
That's all we know.
Not pancakes. It's not. It's poo poo. So, like, and they're shocked and appalled when these things, they say the same thing over and over again. Like, for some reason, people in churches think that pastors and their leaders are somehow above reproach. Like they can't do anything wrong. You know, he was such a good person, you know, and he was my spiritual leader. And, you know, he led the congregation in such a wonderful way, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then you find out, you know, one, that they preach. And then two, they're also the ones doing the actual abuse to actual people. But so I'm really kind of tired of this hypocrisy and people holding these pastors up as like models of the community and all this type of crap. Like it's disgusting because it always comes out. It always does. Especially in the modern era where you can't really hide anymore. People can look up information. They can get in touch with resources, and also they're not living in bubbles. And if enough people start talking to each other and be like, oh, he did that to me too, and there's strength in numbers, you're going to be found out. So I'm just kind of over, like, you know, people pretending like this is not something that, you know, only, you know, deviants do, you know, whoever they are. Well, they're queer people, of course. So, you know, that's a lot. It's
right there in black and white
to,
in the Bible, Helen.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I guess I have to read my Bible.
Obviously.
Anyway, obviously, duh. And my concern, you mentioned you know, if you go to someone and they confess their sin, you know, they're your brother, and then deny it. But the thing is, though, like, that's also used as an excuse to hide information to authorities. And I know that examples like the Jehovah's Witnesses have used that particular passage to stop people from going forward, and the elders to go to authorities. Always handle it within the church. And I'm glad that with the stipulations, the date thing, like I'm losing the phrase. I'm glad that they're actually like going to look at what actually happened, even though the time has passed and gone. Why can't I not remember the phrase for that? Anyway, never mind. I'm moving on. I'm gonna go catch up my brain. I'm bring this to Scott. Statute of limitations. Thank you. Other
There
parts
we
of
go.
my brain.
All right.
There we go. Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Anyway, I'm just mad, I guess. Okay, Scott, go ahead. Take it away from me, and I'll regain my professional composure for this show.
Well, Helen, you were just talking about how they're putting the pastor up on a pedestal, and that's a pretty common thing. BB and Infidel earlier were talking about how this is this guy's MO, right? This is his approach. This is nothing new, and it shouldn't be anything that's surprising. It was kind of horrifying reading about the way that this Bickle guy is presenting himself. This was from the article here. Bickle seemed to make veiled references to his accusers during a sermon he delivered last Sunday. Why is he still giving sermons? What I want to know. During the sermon, he said, Satan's most effective weapon in the end times is accusation, adding whispered innuendo into hostile accusations that destroy lives and relationships. The church is approaching the most glorious and challenging hour in history with the dragon, the black horse, breathing on many to accuse and betray each other. Okay, he's pulling words and phrases directly out of the Bible, right? Talking to a bunch of people who hold this Bible to be sacred, and their what is it? The book in basic instructions before leaving Earth, right? This is the foundational document. So he's ripping words right out of there and holding them up and saying, like you were saying, Helen, if you don't go along with this, you're a bad person. You're a bad Christian. If you want to be a good Christian, you should follow what it says. You should obey what it says. You should watch out for what it says. He's using this tool because he's in that position up on the pedestal. He's using it and it's hard. I'm not inside the guy's mind, but it's hard for me to imagine that it's not intentional, that he doesn't know what he's doing. Obviously, it's possible that he's a true believer and thinks and is convinced that he's on the road to the righteous, and everything that he's doing is justified, and that he's a victim. I don't know. Maybe it's that skeptic sense again. I think he doesn't even have the guts to say the devil made him do it. It's not like he's saying, "Oh, the devil made me do it." He's saying the devil made the accusers make shit up. That's what he's saying. He's saying they are victims of the devil, and that's just cowardice upon cowardice. And it's the frustrating with that the most frustrating part about that is that it works. Is that when he does it, it works. We've talked in earlier segments about how people try to interpret events to match their pre-existing beliefs. They're taking advantage of that from that privileged position on that pedestal. They can even revise history. We talked about that before. We've seen many cases where this works, and so I have no doubt that it's gonna continue to work. I don't expect anything will come out of this investigation. It said in the article that they already switched. They started out with one law firm and switched to another law firm. Okay, well, I'm not sure what happened there. Well, I think I have suspicions about what happened there. I should leave the opening or the possibility that I'm wrong about this, but I don't know. I'm a math teacher. I see 1 and a plus and a 1. I know what should follow that. And what should follow that is Infidel. What's your take on it? Ooh, that was a smooth one right there.
Sometimes you got to shop around for the right solution, and that could very well be they're just shopping around for the solution that fits them.
Are they being boogers? Is that what you're saying? They're trying to find the right way, the right shade of lipstick to put on this pig?
Pretty much. Now, one of the things that Blayton mentioned earlier, that growing up as a pastor's son, I have to agree. My dad didn't do this, but sat through a lot of other ones, and you should be able to guess what somebody's porn preferences is just by what they preach against. Because it's like, oh, okay, they like this. All right, what else? Because that's almost what it feels like, because you just wait long enough and you're going to find out about how whatever they railed about so often is going to be what they're caught doing. So this guy, I'm waiting to see what all comes out on him. And the truth is, though, is I was happy to see that they at least acknowledged that he was stonewalling them from the beginning, because that's got to count for something.
Right.
Because like I mentioned, that previous guy, straightforward, honest, tell the truth. And you know what? We all do things. Each one of the 4 of us may do things and experience things that the other ones would not be willing to experience or do. Not that they think it's even right or wrong, but that's just not part of who you are. But when you try to make that something else and point the finger towards other people for what you view as your own shortcomings, that is a shortcoming. Whether what you did or not is perfectly cool or not in my book, when you make somebody else look like an asshole because of what you're trying to hide for yourself, that makes you that person. Whether what you did is perfectly normal is out the window. So he's already demonstrated the fact that, yes, once again, another thing that Scott, you brought up, have you ever noticed that the people that preach obedience are not obedient people? Or they love to tell everybody else about obedience. Yeah, I bet he does want everybody else to be obedient. Obey.
So shocking.
Just like that guy who said in the Bible, the meek shall inherit the earth. That was not a meek motherfucker. Let me just let you know now. Just sorry for the spoiler. Now, with that in mind, I really hope
by the way.
So, Blayton, where you want to take this?
I really want to someday live in a world where people that espouse all this bullcrap about the Bible and what it means and what it says and how you should live by it actually do that them damn selves. That would be awesome. That would be great for people to stop pointing and just start doing the shit that they believe that I'm supposed to be doing. I guarantee you, just like we've been saying, the dudes that's screaming all this shit, this is what they're doing. So like the loudest voice in the room is the motherfucker you should be looking at as usual. That's really all I've got to say about that. Just actually follow your damn book.
Yeah. Buy your fruits they will know you, right? Is that how it goes? By your, I don't.
That's just,
These are some pretty
That's a
nasty
start.
fruits that I'm
You know,
seeing
you know
here.
what's crazy? Yeah, these
As long as
are
it's
the
not
fruits that I
figs.
usually know them by. Yeah,
Yeah.
when I see these type of fruits, it's like I bet he's
Yep.
one of them. Like it's very accurate.
I'm always,
The Bible got that one
it's
right.
always the don't thou protest too much.
Right.
You
right.
know, and all the deflection tactics that they do. It's, you know, I'm always like, oh, I'm like they're doing some shit. They're doing some shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to point out that I'm kind of a little bit frustrated with the congregation because they were like grieving, you know, the fact that, you know, they for Bickle and, you know, what it was doing to the congregation. And I'm like, what about the victims? I am sorry. I am sorry that this little wrinkle in your like holy plan came undone. And now you're dealing with the consequences and your congregation is grieving. And I'm just in there like, what about the victims? And what they're probably going to do is give thoughts and prayers, which will do about the same thing when we do that when it comes to school shootings. So, you know, I have feelings. I do. And I think that all of you out there, that is, when you start hearing a preacher rail against, you know, adulterers, queer people, poor people, you know, whatever it is, just make sure that you have your skeptic brain on, because I guarantee they're doing some shit and they're trying to push that crap onto somebody else. So on that note, I'm going to wrap this up. And I suggest that if you want to learn about more people doing some crap and some positive things that is not crap, please consider clicking on the video above. Do the thing.
Welcome back to the Nonprofits, folks. Today we are talking about an article coming to us from Only Sky, and it's about the He Gets Us marketing campaign. So if you're unfamiliar with this, you know what? Why am I even saying that? They've spent $1 billion pushing this stuff out there. I'm sure our viewers are well aware. You've probably seen the billboard or the cute little TV commercial, or, you know, the start of the YouTube video where it just, he gets us, you know, he gets us, you know, Jesus knows what it's like, you know, to not be very wealthy. He gets us, you know, he knows what it's like to be a refugee. He gets us. In case you can't figure out what the point of this marketing campaign is, it's about talking about Jesus to as many people who can possibly hear it in any given time frame. The funny thing about it is, despite what the founders and people who run this campaign say, there really doesn't seem to be any value that it's been adding. There doesn't seem to be anybody out there who's, I don't know, become more faithful or just completely converted to Christianity. So yeah, that's kind of what this article goes in depth about. And let's open it up. Kelly, what did you think about this article?
Well, first, I wasn't expecting to read a short novella this week,
Yeah, it's long.
but it was an interesting one. I'll give it that. It was the first thing that hit me, and I remember what the source. It was a really biased article. We're going to be biased in our coverage, so I don't even know why that's a thing. But to me, yeah, it just seemed like this big giant advertising campaign, one that not only tries to convince non-Christians that Christians are people just like you and Jesus was just like you and you really should join us. But at the same time, it looked like it was also trying to convince current Christians to go out and spread the same message a little bit more. Hey, you got to go out and convince people Jesus is just like us, you know? So, but as you were saying, it doesn't appear to have done anything. I mean, there was never any stated goals to the campaign or anything. So I'm not even sure what they were trying to do with it. It's kind of a really weird, off the wall thing. Phoebe, you got anything you want to throw in about it?
Never in my life have I ever seen somebody go and take from the Jehovah's Witness playbook Yes, go and spread the message. Go out, tell your fellow man that they need to read the good book and they need to hear the words of Jesus. And it actually worked. No one has ever gone, yeah, those cart-wielding, door-knocking suit children are gonna get me to go to church and, give up on my, freedoms and stuff. No one's ever said that. And this is probably the first time someone's gone, yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses. They're doing it right, God blimey. Wow. Let's do what they do. I've never in my life I ever think that somebody went, Jehovah's Witnesses doing it well, they've got 2/3 of their children that are born into the religion and leaving it. But they're knocking on doors and getting recruits and stuff. They must be doing something right. Helen, when was the last time a Jehovah's Witness knocked on your door?
Not in a while, because I have a plaque on my door that says that no proselytizing. Anyone that violates this law will be sacrificed to Cthulhu.
That'll do it.
Yeah, so I don't get knocked down anymore. So when I was reading over this, I was thinking about because I had just seen the Hillsong documentary about them pushing this ad campaign about to get absorb millennials and younger people into the church, but it's not working, because guess what? As this generation keeps growing up and they're teaching their kids, and they're going to grow up, that they're becoming less and less religious. They're like, you are not progressing with the rest of the world. And so basically, and who does this appeal to? The only people this appeals to are people that are already a part of a religion and are faithful. This is not doing anything to me, and I also too, I doubt he gets queer people.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I
doubt he gets people that has autism or, I'm just saying.
Yeah. It very much seems to me like, more than anything, this is a campaign focused at wealthy Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Like people who are already very much in the faith, people who, maybe pew sitters, as they call them, right?
Pew warmers.
Pew warmers. Thank you. So you're here, and like you technically follow Jesus, but you don't really do that much. So here's a great way to do that. Give to our campaign, because look at all the great work that we're obviously doing. Again, which is why it's very, very much worth reading this article, no matter how long it is, because there is a moment where our wonderful author gives us just this incredible breakdown of the search results, right? For things like Jesus and He Gets Us. And y'all, they are paltry. I mean, they are just paltry. For $1 billion that you're spending, you can't get people to just type it into Google. I mean, that is outright a failure, in my opinion. But I did want to touch on this real quick, just because I thought it was funny, because there's a lot of really great stuff in this article, y'all. There is actually a website that they talk about for He Gets Us. And apparently you can go to the website and then tell them that you did good deeds for Jesus, and then they will send you wristbands or t-shirts or books or whatever. But apparently there's no like criteria for checking. Like,
is it show and tell time? Is it show and tell time? Is it show and tell? Come on.
I desperately wanted to get one, you guys, but I was deeply concerned about them having my personal information. So not at this time, but hopefully in the future I can come on with just wristband after. Kelly,
it is a bit of a. It's how can I say it? It's like someone's walked into a bank, pulled down, a balaclava, and gone, "Yeah, come along, I'm doing things." And then they're gone, "Hang on a minute, what on earth are you doing? What on earth are you doing around here?" Because it's $1 billion apparently, $1 billion. I mean, it ain't going into the overarching He Gets Us campaign or anything like that. what's actually happening here is that there's a bit of a bait and switch going on here. It's actually not going into this campaign. It's actually, sliding its way, sliding itself. It's going to park itself quite nicely under the banner of campaigning for what we believe in, to hate those people that we don't like, so that we can consolidate our power, so that we can continue to hate those people, so we can get more money from you, so that you can see that we're doing more things, so that we can get more money by telling you that you need to help us to fight the actual good fight, so that we can hate on more people, so that we can consolidate power, so we can get this vicious cycle that keeps going round and round and round and round. And one of my favorite people ever in the world of fiction said the following: somebody needs some therapy around here, because someone said that we mean soft on crime, soft on drugs, soft on communism, and soft on defense, soft on the causes of crime, and we're going to tax you back to the Stone Age because people shouldn't have to work a day if they don't want to. And instead of going, excuse me, you reactionary, right-wing, xenophobic, homophobic, anti-education, anti-choice, pro-gun, leave it to Beaver, back to the 50s, we all seem to have cowered in the corner and gone, please, leave me alone. Don't hurt me. When we should be going, follow the money. Follow the sodding money, people. The money isn't going in this campaign. These evangelicals are being told it's going into this campaign, but it's just not. It's just not, is it, Kelly?
No, it seems like it didn't, as SR was saying, it's pretty easy to get, there's not any oversight on getting all these little pieces of swag. There didn't seem to be a whole lot of oversight on where the money was being given to, too. It was just like, oh, I'm going to tell a bunch of people in my neighborhood that Jesus is just like them. Okay, here's 10 grand. So it's like $1 billion worth of money, and there just doesn't seem to be any oversight to it. It just seems to be a bunch of, I hate to say it, a bunch of preachers lining their pockets with a little bit of extra cash.
Yeah.
Say isn't so.
Yeah.
I would love to say it wasn't so. I would love to, but churches don't have to open up their books like other nonprofits do. So we'll never, ever know. We'll never know. But one of the things that is a salient point brought up in the article about that $1 billion, at least it's not being wasted on other, they wouldn't consider it wasted. We would on other things. That $1 billion didn't go to oppose LGBTQ rights. It didn't go to the anti-freedom, anti-abortion advocates. It didn't go to help pass draconian, out-of-date, bigoted laws. So, as far as I'm concerned, hey, let them spend a huge sum of money on a seemingly useless and, quite frankly, stupid campaign. Let them keep doing it. I'm all for it.
Buy more Super Bowl ad time.
Yeah.
That ain't cheap.
Yeah. Spend your money there instead of trying to pass laws. I
almost want to write them a letter and tell them how much it changed my life and what a great program it is. And you should expand on it. Keep spending more, put more money into it. But I have a moral system, so I won't do that. I can't take advantage of people, unlike the organizers of this freaking campaign.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue, Kelly, because this article itself is titled "Will Evangelicals Be Fooled by the He Gets Us campaign?" And I think what you just touched on is a really good piece of it, because it, again, looking at the metrics, it doesn't seem like non-Christians are really taking up this message. Right. It doesn't seem like Muslims or Hindus or atheists are just suddenly just super interested in Jesus and just like forgetting about all the bad stuff that religion has done forever. Like, it doesn't seem to be the case. So the question then comes to, well, are the people that this message is for, are the evangelicals believing this message? Do you think more evangelicals agree with this presentation of Christ in these campaigns, or do you think the goal, like, do Christians already agree with this message, or are people switching over and saying like, well, I do believe in Christ, but I didn't think of Christ like that. Okay, that's cool. What do you think on that, Phoebe?
I feel like I should be sitting under Christ the Redeemer and redeeming myself from all the things that I have done wrong in my life, because I don't feel like I'm just doing something wrong here. I must be. So many of us must be doing something wrong. If this is how people can make money in this day and age, I'm doing it wrong. I'm doing it wrong. And we need to be looking at this for what it is. Yes, okay, it's a artsy-fartsy campaign, but it's keeping people employed to do what is effectively nothing. In reality, it's just, let's buy a bit of ad time here, put a billboard up here. Doesn't really mean anything, but, you know, I've got a job now. Woo, make work jobs through the church. It's just a bit, really? Just a bit, well, I feel like I'm missing out. I missed out on, you know, tax exemptions. I missed out on, you know, an easy life, all that thing, you know.
That pesky conscience. So
that
pesky.
pesky free thought that I've got.
Yeah. Pesky.
Yeah. Wanting the truth, unfortunately, requires that you have to sit out from some seemingly fun activities. But yeah, what do you think on this, Helen? Do you think that evangelicals are getting behind this campaign message, or were they already there? I mean, how do you think this is affecting them?
I think that the old, like, fire and brimstone idea of heaven and hell isn't appealing to modern sensibilities. And I think that because there is more rhetoric around skepticism and free thinking and secular humanism, they have to be, you know what, like, we'll make these evangelicals feel really good about loving Jesus because he gets everybody, and you'll get people too, and you'll open your heart to your fellow human beings, because they hear the secularist humanist argument and they're like, huh. And then they have to push against that, because if they're not filling out the pews and giving them the money, what they gonna do? You know, and it just it boggles my mind. There was $1 billion to spend on this. Do you know how many children could have been fed with $1 billion?
Yeah. Could have done a lot of good in the world,
Yeah.
but I guess
Yes.
this is more important. What do you
Yeah.
think on all this, Kelly?
But it did do a lot of good. It made a whole bunch of Christians really realize that Jesus is their buddy. It was Buddy Christ, like from the movie. You know, that's it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's Buddy Christ. You know, so yeah, it seemed to me like in a way, it was a great campaign for them to reinforce what they already believed, which is why it was so easy for them to get the money, right? And then you talk about Helen, you bring up a good point. That money could have gone to do really good, but really, when has church money ever really gone to feed children? I mean, I know you see sometimes it happens, but I mean, there's a lot of hungry children out there, and there's a lot of money in a lot of churches, and it ain't helping those children out. And I think we all know that. You know, every time you see a church feeding children, it's almost like a token thing so that it looks good, but the problem could be solved with a lot of the money, and they're just not doing it. So, and I don't want to say that they should have to be responsible for it, but if they're going to preach kindness and changing the world all for the better, actually start doing it instead of making more commercials about how Jesus is your buddy.
Man, I think that's a really, really good point. So what about, I know we're all nonprofits here, but what about maybe doing a little bit of a prediction? What do we think, guys? Do we think that this campaign is just going to peter out? Like, we're not going to hear about it in 6 months? Or do we think it's just going to like ramp the freak up, and by the end of 2023, there'll just be billboards everywhere? What do you think?
It's Peter Popov style nonsense coming through again. Peter Popov and his seed money. Peter Popov running around again. You'll have mega pastors running around because it's an easy way to get the greenback. It's just so easy. Here is a large check That'll do. Here's another large check. That'll do. Oh, here's a third one, and that'll do nicely as well. So it's not going anywhere. The campaign may be complete utter horse manure. It may be, dreamt up out of the stinking vagina of somebody that, has nothing better to think about. But, it's just a load of rubbish what the actual campaign is, and that's just irrelevant here. It's the fact that, George Washington is landing squarely on a green piece of paper in front of you and going, yeah, that's quite nice. How wonderful. I've got a large stack of these now. This must be working. Let's keep doing that.
Helen, what do you think?
Because we're getting close to an election year, and I just know the Christian right. I just know them. I bet we're going to see more of a push, because it's like, basically they're going to be a line like, vote for Jesus. Your vote is your vote for Jesus, and he gets you. And they'll come, and the two messages will be all flim flam in these people's heads. And they will equate the campaign with voting for Jesus, voting the person that's closer to their God, or, whatever it is. And I can see them to get more of those donations. And it's like, well, we put $1 billion into it. We're going to get our money's worth. Especially if we're moving into an election year. I can just see it happen, because it's the same playbook all the time.
Yeah.
You know?
What do you think, Kelly? Is this going to be something that's we're just never going to see the end of, or will this be gone by the next nonprofits episode?
No, it won't be gone by the next nonprofits episode, unfortunately. But now where I live, I'm out in the rural areas, and I don't have those billboards here. So they do have some room to expand, and they probably will. But, human beings are fickle. We tend to follow fads. We don't stick with stuff. And I think you'll probably see it die out in 2-3 years, just on a realistic level. It will probably expand for another 6 months to a year, and then start dying off after that. So,
yeah. I think this article does a really good job of showcasing how this campaign currently is just not successful. And I don't think any of that is going to change anytime soon. So I think that's great. For where I sit, if evangelicals want to spend $1 billion, wasting it on messages to their own people, I'm not upset with that. So, but yeah, I think that's it for today. But as always, folks, if you want to hear more from us, click the link above.
hi, everyone. Have I got a story for the nonprofits today? This comes from Hemet Mehta, our friendly atheist. And it's about how Texas atheists in Fort Worth tried to put up ads for an event opposing Christian nationalism, but were rebuffed by the city government. Personally, I think it was the wrong thing to do, but I'd like to get Scott's opinion on it. What do you say, Scott?
Well, I think clearly this is a constitutional violation, right? That, they're letting other nonprofit organizations, as long as they jump through the hoops and they satisfy the requirements, they're allowed to advertise their events. And so this particular group was singled out, presumably because it was an atheist group. Although Fort Worth is not being very forthcoming as far as the specific reasons, they were just saying that they didn't satisfy the requirements that they needed, but the same group they've done it before, and so they know what they're doing. They know the whatever the paperwork or whatever the steps need to be done, they're familiar with that, and so it's clear. I mean, it's silly that we're even having to discuss whether or not this is a free speech violation, because it obviously is. My question, of course, is going to be, well, why would they do that? I mean, why would Fort Worth do something that so clearly and obviously will eventually be overturned or ruled against or something like that? And Mally, what do you think about that? Why do you think they're doing that?
Why indeed? Why would they do something that is so blatant and is only going to gather more attention to the cause. Now this is blown up and people know about it far more so than they would if they put up banners. I can't think of a logical reason that they would do this. I don't think that there is a logical reason, to be perfectly clear. Only illogical ones can account for something like this. And it is clearly discrimination. There's no way to hide it. They try to dress it up like they didn't fulfill the requirements. They did. I took a look online at the requirements, and the group fulfilled them perfectly. They're just now having trouble just now at this precise moment out of nowhere. I am definitely not buying it. My thoughts on this are that, so I want to avoid the Godwin's law thing where everything that I don't like is fascism, right? But, you know, I think there's something to that here, because the fascism playbook is about silencing opposition. And we remember, you know, the threats to the press under Trump. And we remember we know that they're silencing opposition. This is something that has become very well evident. And fascism is at its essence an ustocracy. You know, in Germany, it was the Aryans. And here I call it the white picket fence supremacists. Because that's what they want. They want to come home from a hard day at the Golly Gee Jeepers factory and put their feet up and have their wife rub them while they drink a cold beer. And that way of life is under attack, or, you know, it's organically fading, I should say. And so they're throwing out all the steps, or throwing out all the stops to attack this. And, you know, it's just blatant. Sometimes they can't hide it. And I think this is one such case. I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
I mean, I agree. It's definitely a completely blatant case of discrimination. What really stuck out to me was it was 3-4 years ago. They did the exact same thing. The same group posted banners for another event, had no problem with it, but there was a giant public outcry. So I think what we're seeing right now is along the same lines as all those lawsuits we saw regarding the last election, where they had no merit. They knew it had no merit, but they had to show the base. Hey, you know, we're with you. We're, you know, even though we're going to lose this case, we're with you. So it's you mentioned fascism, and you didn't want, you know, it's, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So I think that's exactly what it is. And it's kind of crazy to me that they just sort of invented this sort of amorphous one rule that they haven't met this time around. And then they refuse to tell them what that rule is so they can try to amend their banners to meet it. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky. What do you think, Scott? Yeah, I agree. I mean, it seems kind of like just petty bickering, just like, you're not going to play according to my rules, so screw off. You know, you can't, you know, I'm going to change the rules. But I wonder if this is maybe part of a bigger plan. You know, you've heard of the phrase, throwing shit against the wall to see what sticks. And, you know, I'm wondering, and we saw that actually work to good effect in the Roe v. Wade case, right? We had Roe v. Wade had established abortion rights as established law of the land. But, you know, they just kept chipping away at it, kept chipping away at it until you get that perfect storm with just the right case, with just the right court, with just, you know, just the right timing and the public opinion, and just, you know, just the perfect balance of everything. And then they were able to gain their victory. And so I wonder if this is just, you know, let's just keep making them go to court until one of these days there's going to be a court that rules against. And so then that's going to set an established precedent there. Consistency, of course, is no problem for the people who employ these types of plans, but really it just shows a disdain for the whole American legal system altogether. I mean, it's viewed more as something that's to be gamed and manipulated to get a particular result, rather than starting from base principles and working our way up. You know, these types of decisions should come from the ground up, not from the top down. We should look at what's important in our country, what's legal in our country, what's founding principles in our country, and then take it from there. Not start at the ending point and then see, okay, well, what kind of path can we can we figure out that will lead us to this desired conclusion? Kelly, what's your take here?
One of the things that gets me about this whole thing is that, and I think a lot of probably people who are working for the city who are denying these permits are probably not Christian nationalists, but they are Christians who love this nation. And that's a different thing. A lot of people don't understand what Christian nationalists are. And they are, as Mally pointed out, they are neo-fascists. It's a neo-fascist movement that has co-opted religious and patriotic language and symbolism to push a fascist agenda. And it's something that we all need to stand up and fight against. It has nothing to do with being a good Christian, but it's actually antithetical to Christian beliefs. Most importantly, treating people the way you would want to be treated yourself. One of the things I was wondered about, and I'd like to get some feedback from the panel on this, do you think that the Metroplex Atheists, who are the organization who were singled out on this, do you think that they were singled out? Do you think if they had been a different organization, or if they were doing an event that it didn't have to do with Christian nationalism, that this wouldn't have happened to them? What do you think, Mally?
Oh, well, absolutely. Of course they were singled out. You can tell by the timing and the lame excuse they got, as you said, an amorphous rule that they were referring to that doesn't exist. I mean, you can look this stuff up. It's public domain. Just go ahead and look at their requirements. They fulfilled them. It's awfully suspicious, especially after the first time there was a big hullabaloo, and then the signs are getting vandalized. And of course, who's in control of that particular city government. It's just people that don't want these people to speak. And it's really ironic because it's about Christian nationalism. The event is set to call out Christian nationalism. And what is the response? The exact thing that they're complaining about. It's just so ironic. There's no better advertisement for their event than what happened to them. So yeah, I think it is definitely about them.
Chris, what do you think?
Well, sort of bouncing off something that Scott said a little earlier, back about the Roe v. Wade issue. In the years following the Roe v. Wade ruling, there were a lot of smaller rulings in states that were trying to chip away at those rights, trying to put laws in place like trigger laws and things like that. So I think this might very well be something along those lines where they're sort of trying to tread the line, see how far they can go with it. So eventually, if they can just keep pushing that line and pushing that line and pushing that line, they can get to where they really want, which is if you're going to have anything that is a religious organization, you're not allowed to advertise. If you're going to have any sort of anything that has anything to do with calling out Christian nationalists or anything like that, you're just not going to be able to hold those sort of events or at least advertise them publicly. But I think this is definitely a shot across the bow in that way. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's definitely what this is. And what worries me the most here is that now they're not even trying to hide it. Like, we started out talking about how this was obviously, I mean, there's lots in the news these days that you can see that can go either way. This is not one of those things. And so it was clearly a violation of this particular group. Well, I suppose we are assuming that they haven't been doing this to other groups. I mean, none of my research turned up any other groups that were affected, or even other instances of this group were not targeted. And so it was this one time with this one group. And so it's clearly a timing thing. It seems really obvious that this is happening, but it's not so much that this kind of thing is happening, because this kind of thing has always been happening. But now it's like they're not even trying to hide it. It's like the flaunting and the throwing it in the face and the shooting across the bow, like Chris was saying, like that's part of the feature, right? That's the feature, not a bug. It gets noticed. It shows. I think it was Mally that was talking about signaling to their base that, here we're doing what you wanted us to do. We're standing up. We're fighting the good fight against these heathens, and I don't know. It just doesn't seem I don't know. It doesn't seem very American to me. And you know, and if this is a sign of the times, I don't think it's boding well for the American political or legal system. Of course, you know, people say that in every year, but you know, I guess I'm one of those people now, so I'm saying that about now. So that's kind of my take.
All right, then. One of the things I noticed that when because I read a lot of the news, believe it or not, on the nonprofits, there was actually an event put on by a secular group in Tulsa or Oklahoma City. I'm sorry, Oklahoma City, the last week, and they went off without a hitch. They actually did it at a church. They talked about Christian nationalism, and they didn't have any problem with the national or the local government. So I really have a problem with what's going on here in Fort Worth. I don't think it's right at all. I'm hoping that the Metroplex atheists solve this. I don't know what kind of outcome they're looking for. I was wondering what people here thought might be a good outcome. I know getting their banners up in time for the event would be the best outcome. And I know they're going to court for a temporary injunction to get those banners put back up. But in the long term, what do you think would be a good resolution on this, Mally?
Well, a good resolution, obviously, you know, they want to get their banners up. As far as this particular event, I think that they've got everything they could ask for with all the publicity. You know, all the publicity is worth a lot more than, you know, any amount of banners. I think they're gonna see a great turnout. I'm interested in an outcome, though, a wider breadth outcome. And I was very pleased to see that what you just talked about in Tulsa happened in a church. And, you know, we need Christian allies in this fight. They are invaluable, and there are plenty of them out there that see what's happening and they want no part of it because they know it's not very Christ-like.
Not to cut in, but there was actually a minister speaking at the Metroplex Atheist seminar too. So
it's what we need. That is what we need. Absolutely. And my gosh, I mean, you know, it's like how straight people need to be allies for the LGBTQ community, and how Black people need white people in their corner. You know, they can't, of course they can do it on their own, but we have to be allies, and we need the Christian allies. Allyship is really, really, really important. Christians are a majority, just like white people or straight people are. And they hold the keys to power. And, you know, if we can convince them to be a little bit more like Jesus and a little bit less like old Donnie T, I think we're going to have a lot better results.
Chris?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Allyship with Christians that are as much about free speech, more about free speech than they are about promoting and their own ends, which may or may not be their specific ends. In this instance, I think a really good turnout for this, or a really good ending for this, is going to be honestly what we're starting to see already, which is just the visibility of this kind of a fight. And hopefully seeing some sort of ruling. I mean, I really hope that this makes its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, and we have to have some sort of a ruling where this sort of thing can't go on. Just laying down some sort of a foundation for freedom of speech in this sort of context that's across the board, can't be misinterpreted or anything like that. Scott?
Yeah, I exactly. I think, and part of that is going to be to reframe the conversation here. You know, there's really kind of two conflicts happening here. We have the Christian, conservative Christian group, or whatever you want to call it, is against this atheist group. That's what that's the battle they're fighting. Right. And the battle that we're looking at is the First Amendment issue. Right. It's a freedom of speech. And so I think we need to focus on, you know, we see this tactic used so often, you know, kind of a wolf in sheep's clothing kind of setup. You know, they're pushing it as one type of issue, but really what's happening is a particular type of discrimination. And so I think it's, I think we need to frame, ideally, an outcome from an event like this or from a conflict like this would be that, you know, now we see the cockroaches scurrying across the floor, and now we see the cards are on the table, and now we see what's going on. You know, it obviously, you know, it's going to be different for different situations. You know, different events like this that happen will have more or less of an effect, but I would like to see things rolling in that direction. If there's one thing that annoys me so much is that it's ambiguous language. It's people kind of clouding what they're saying with a wink and a nudge when they're really saying something else. And so let's just lay it out bare. Let's talk about what we're talking about here, and let's make a wise and sound decision based off of that.
Yeah, like Chris said, I mean, they're still quacking like a bigot, right? And that's, if it quacks like a bigot, it's still a bigot. So no matter how they try to hide the language or couch the language. And I always find it kind of funny that they think that they're hiding what they're saying, but we all know what they're saying. We all hear the dog whistles.
Right.
I find it kind of hysterical.
Plausible deniability, though. Plausible
Yeah,
deniability.
I guess. There you go. Plausible deniability. There you go. So, yeah. What do you think there's any, just real quick, does anybody think there's something we can do to prevent something like this happening again in the future?
Vigilance.
Yeah, that'll be it. You know, just what we're doing now, talking about it, bringing it to people's attention, you know, what this group is doing with, you know, filing their lawsuit or fighting their legal battle there. I mean, that's just, yeah, vigilance.
Mm-hmm.
And don't let it get swept under the rug, because, you know, we know we're on a 24-hour news cycle these days. And so it's very easy to forget things and move on to things and so on. So, you know, keep these important issues in the headlights.
I think this is a good example of a small group of people standing up and actually getting something done that for a good cause. Right. I'm always talking about standing up and doing things that it doesn't take much. When you have a small group of people, it takes even less because you're sharing the work. And this is a really good example of that, I think. You know what? This has been a great segment. I had a great time, and thank you for watching. And if you'd like more of the nonprofits, you can click right here.
The de-evolution of one man. Richard Dawkins used his new podcast to promote more transphobic lies. And this article is by friendlyatheist.com by Hemant Mehta on July 31st of 2023. And basically, Richard Dawkins, not any surprise to any of us, has launched a podcast called The Poetry of Reality, which has been an avenue for him to promote more transphobic ideas. And in fact, his first episode of this podcast was with very famous transphobe Helen Joyce, talking about what is gender. And of course, he goes into talks about biological sex and all of that. So before I get into all of my rants, I want to hear about what you all have to say about this topic.
So when I was going through my own deconstruction process, and but unlike like a lot of atheists, I wasn't interested in the Four Horsemen. I didn't read any of Dawkins' work. I kind of knew for him in the periphery, and I knew he was a respected evolutionary biologist and making that education through his work and lecture. Apparently, he can't stay in his lane, and he's now a gender expert, which is problematic. And he's clearly only following a biggest narrative and isn't sitting back and asking himself about, like, is this true? You know, and I'm sorry, but I have no desire to listen to his podcast, as I really like my sanity. And this article is an example of why. And I would also like to point out that Helen Joyce, this TERF that he had on this first episode, and also a bigot, they were just sitting there sniffing their own farts and not realizing this rhetoric and falsehoods are actually being said about actual human beings. And also, I'd like to point out that this terrible person shares my name, and I would like to point out that hashtag not all Helens. So my kind of perspective on this is that I'm a little bit frustrated because he should know the science and he should be inquiring about these things, but he's not. And it's just very, very, very frustrating. So, I would like to get your opinion on this, Scott, because I've obviously have lots of opinions, but I can go more into that a little later.
Sure. Well, when I was reading this article, it became clear that there was really two subjects being addressed here. One is the actions and the comments and the ideas of Richard Dawkins and how they impact the LGBTQ community. There's others on this panel that are much more directly affected by those issues, and so I'll defer time to hearing a much more important perspective in regards to those issues. But the second issue was, what can we do? How should we interact? How should we as atheists respond to this type of thing? How should we react to Richard Dawkins? Basically it's bigotry. We have a moral responsibility of calling this out. And one of the themes on the nonprofits that one of the things we talk about frequently is how religious leaders are afforded unfair and undeserved respect simply due to their position in the community. And so this is a chance for us to put our money where our mouth is. Richard Dawkins, we know, is a prominent figure in the atheist community, but that does not mean that we as atheists are expected to go along with whatever he says. That's not what our group does. That's what the other group does. And so if we want to promote ourselves as being reasonable and rational and free thinking humanists, then we need to step up and say the hard things. We need to say the difficult things. And the morally correct thing to do when your leaders, and I'll use that term loosely in this case, when they're doing bad things, is to say that they're doing bad things and to oppose to doing those bad things. And so if we want to be taken seriously, and when we talk about things, we need to speak with our actions as well as our words. And so we need to step up and we need to call things out as we see them. Phoebe, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I can't stand Richard Dawkins. I never really have liked the man. And the descent of man is always something that I enjoy to watch from afar, especially those that we have for some reason beatified, and yet I deliberately choose very religious language to the way that people are hero worshipped and cult worshipped. But I don't know what Mr. Dawkins believes. I don't know if he genuinely believes what he's saying, or whether he is just seeing a way of making money about the issues that he think make him money from the same people who he was making money from in the first place. So the group of people that he's mainly targeting are fairly angry, white, middle class individuals, commonly referred to in the United Kingdom as a gammon. So they rally against society, they rally against this, they rally against that. They're typically of his age, and so on. And I wonder whether he actually believes what he's actually saying here. And if he doesn't believe what he's saying, it makes it even worse, because there's an insincerity to everything that he is doing. He, in the article, is described as a brilliant long-form individual, but a really crap short-form individual. And this does go some way on a slightly different thing to show that everything is now getting boiled down to the 60-second TikTok and the 240 platform formerly known as Twitter. That we've got to this thing where if you try to have nuance, you try to have discussion, you try to say things, you try to do things that are more than just those 60 seconds here, those 60 seconds there, and the argumentation and the conflict, you end up with what is effectively a diatribe of us and them. And it's become this nonsense where my existence has become cannon fodder. And I want to know what Ben thinks about his existence being cannon fodder.
Yeah, I've been continually frustrated with Richard Dawkins, and I do think he knows that there's nuance. As a biologist, especially in the field of evolutionary biology, you understand that there are kind of ambiguous lines between a lot of things. Like even when we're talking speciation, like, yeah, we've set these lines in place when we studied this as a way to categorize things in our brains easier. But we know that that's not the extent of reality in terms of different species. So I think Richard Dawkins understands that there's nuance here, but instead of going too far into the science here, because we've on other shows and other episodes of this, we've talked about why sex and gender are non-binary, but I wanted to today go into his logic and what he specifically does when he communicates this, because this especially, number one, is the big Achilles heel to his argument, because logically it doesn't hold up. And for people who might not necessarily be able to argue the scientific points, you can argue against the logic here. So kind of two main things I want to focus on with him are, number one being the use of the term biological as being intentionally ambiguous because it allows them to move the goalpost. So if you're imagining a conversation with somebody and you say, this person is a biological male or a biological female, what traits come to mind? We all might think of different things. You might think of anatomy. You might think of hormones. You might think of chromosomes. But everyone has their own idea of like, this is what biologically male or female means. So that's already a little bit ambiguous. You're not pinning down what trait you're standardizing that as. But if you think about hormones being a component of biological sex, like your hormones are biological substances. They have biological functions in your body. So if you have a trans person that is on gender-affirming hormone therapy, they have changed their biology. They have changed a component of their biological sex, namely their hormonal sex, which I would argue is a category of sex. So if you break down every one of these components, being chromosomes, anatomy, gametes, hormones, if you broke those all down and then assigned a person based on each one of these factors, you'd find most people are somewhere in between, especially on the hormonal standpoint. So even if you take cis people, you get a variety of combinations. So if you take a post-op trans woman, they are probably chromosomally male, hormonally and anatomically female, and with no gametes. So we don't have a very clear boundary there at all. But if someone takes the term biological, you need to make sure that you're forcing them to define their criteria. Do they mean gametes? Do they mean chromosomes? Do they mean anatomy? Because as we know, one of those characteristics might not be in place, and they would still be viewed in society as a cis man or a cis woman. So then you pinpoint those topics and you say, okay, well, what about people that don't produce gametes? And they'll say, well, it's about your potential to produce gametes, which gets into this weird gendered soul argument. Like, but then how do you determine what gamete potential somebody has if they've never produced gametes? So you have to pin them down, because it ends up being completely incoherent once you get to that point. But if they just say like very vague biological sex, that could mean a multitude of things. So that's something that allows him to technically be right, even if he's not right with whatever he says. But the other point I wanted to bring up with this is the ecological fallacy, which I actually wrote some syllogisms to use for this. I'm not usually the one to do that. I mean, maybe I'm becoming secular rarity in J-Mike today, but the ecological fallacy is when you take a population statistic and apply it to an individual. And this is often used for trans women in sports and for gender-affirming care for minors. And so basically it assumes that the individual exhibits the same characteristics as the entire group. And this is very problematic when you're creating guidelines, because not every individual is going to meet those set of standards that you would assume are the case for the whole population. So I wrote a little syllogism here relating to the average heights of women compared to men. So all of us here know who Cynthia is. She's a lovely, frequent guest and host on all of the ACA shows. But I wrote a syllogism saying the average height of a woman is 5'4". Cynthia is a woman, therefore Cynthia is 5'4". And we all know this isn't true. I know Cynthia. She's a tall person. She is not 5'4". But if we look at this, especially with trans women in sports, you think of the population. People think, oh, but what is the average for women? And that's all that they think of. But you're not considering the fact that each individual does not necessarily meet those criteria. And the average itself isn't even a data point on the spectrum. It's just the central tendency of the values. It might not even be an actual data point. So this is really problematic. And this fallacy is used to perpetuate stigma surrounding like racial issues as well. Like you hear about this with this neighborhood has a higher crime rate. Bob lives in this neighborhood. Therefore, Bob is more likely to commit a crime. So you see, this logic is extremely problematic. And if we view it in the sense of racial disparities, like we see that this is a problem. But once the same logic is applied to trans people, suddenly people don't recognize it as a problem anymore. So I know that was a little bit of a rant, but I was really passionate about this.
But it was an awesome rant.
Yeah, but to follow on from what you were saying, I am a trans woman.
You're allowed to rant.
Well, very much so. But following on from what you were saying, I am a trans woman, and I am 6'4". I am above average height for a woman, and there are other women, such as, say, I don't know, Brittany Griner, who is significantly taller than I am. So does that mean that Brittany Griner should be banned as well?
Mm-hmm.
But somebody who has been ranting away, I'm going to give him a bit of a break. So I want to throw to the whole panel, and should we recommend the original evolution text of Dawkins, or should we just throw him in the bin? Helen?
Oh, I don't know, because this is my kind of problem with this thing that we're discussing, is that you can be brilliant in one field, right? And understand your particular thing that you wanted to study for, like he's an evolutionary biologist. This is the thing that he educates on. But does he understand the reality of gender and sex, and how, you know, we can define these things, and that gender exists on a spectrum? Does he want to know these things? Does he care? And based on his rhetoric lately, he doesn't seem to. And we all know that he knows people that probably are experts in this field. And what is kind of bothering me is that if we decide to toss the work he has done into the bin, does that negate the people that actually learned something from him and learned about evolutionary biologists and started to question things about creationism? Do we toss that aside? I don't know, because yeah, he's being a bigot and terrible right now, but I'm always in this thing about like, well, you could be really good at one thing and be terrible on like social issues. So I'm kind of in this weird place with it. But again, I'm not really a big fan of Dawkins either. So, you know, I don't think I'm the person to ask, because I don't have a dog in this fight. All I'm sitting over here going is like, you're being a bigot and you're being terrible already to marginalized groups. And I'm also as a queer person, it pisses me off. So I'm sitting over here going like, I really don't care how smart you are. You are on the wrong side of history when it comes to this issue. So that's kind of my kind of feeling on it. But those people that helped him, like there are certain groups and people that he influenced them to think about the world more skeptically. So I don't know. And to me, he's just another cranky old man that has some bad takes. And I think that we can do better going forward.
Yeah, I think I agree, but I think we need to. It depends. I mean, right? The question is, should we still support Dawkins' work in other areas? And I mean, on one hand, he clearly has credentials and experience and research in the area. On the other hand, he's turned out to be quite the asshole, and so there's going to be a balance going on there. Right. The question would be, will the assholeness affect the scientific representation that he's giving? And you know, it's hard to say. I mean, at this point, I listened to his podcast today, and it was really abhorrent. It was difficult to listen to, and there really wasn't a lot of science in it, especially if we compare it to say there was an article written by Stephen Novella at sciencebasedmedicine.com, where he kind of breaks down the differences between gender and sex, and the fact that it's not that it's more of a bimodal situation than a dichotomy, right? One or the other, black and white kind of thing. He's talking about how he uses science to show that even with any of those decision factors that Dr. Ben was talking about, even within those situations, there's plenty of gray area for us to take into consideration. And that gray area is people. And so are we going to respect those people? But if we compare the two approaches that Dawkins used and that Stephen Novella uses, it's clear to me that the science is slipping out of Dawkins' representation about the way that he presents. I used to think that he was a very spot on and very fine science advocate. But now I'm starting to question. I was physically ill listening to his podcast today. And there, just to give you an idea of the kind of things he was saying, first of all, he was very flippant throughout the whole thing. And I don't know if that's just because he's British or if there's an actual representation of his attitude there. But he suggested that some parents would prefer to have a trans kid than a gay kid. Just the ignorance just in that one statement is mind-boggling. But if any of our listeners are going to be listening to that podcast, I would recommend that you also either immediately before or immediately after read that article by Stephen Novella. And I think we can make sure to have the link in the show notes here. But just the difference in their approaches and their presentations is amazing. And so to answer Phoebe's question before, and I'll pass it to Ben in a second, but to answer your question, Phoebe, I think we're definitely getting to a point where we need to, or at least in my opinion, he's lost any amount of slack that was going to be given to him. And I think it's to the point where, I'm just going to move on. Ben, what's your take here?
I was just going to quickly respond to Phoebe's question and say that I think it is okay to still learn from the good things that he has said in the past. And even if he has some good ideas, it's okay to learn from those. But it's important to not let him profit from those. So if people want to use one of his books to learn, get it used from somewhere else. Don't be giving him the revenue from it. Unfollow him on the social medias. We don't need to listen to him there. And there are plenty of other up and coming scientists and newer people with better character that also have similar credibility in the field of evolutionary biology. So that's my perspective on that.
Yeah. And to answer my own question, if you're a mathematician, you've probably been taught things that were developed by the Unabomber. So if you want to find out more about the nonprofits, click here.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.